Our topic is getting value from your data and analytics. So very great follow-up to Christine's presentation as we go through and to continue to dive into that. If you think about it, really the data and the analytics drive, hopefully, all of the decisions that we're making within our organization, and for that matter, even within our lives. Without the data and analytics behind it, you're looking at tea leaves, you're spinning the magic 8-ball, which way is my cowlick going, to kind of point me in a direction and such. So really important stuff for how we're bringing it. So what I'll do is I'll start out, I'll ask one question to kind of get us going here, and maybe each of you can answer that question. And then while they're doing that, hopefully you guys are thinking, how can I follow up? And then we'll have the toss the catch box around so that you guys can partake in the panel as well. So why don't we start with this? We'll start with who does or who should own the customer engagement analytics function within an organization? We'll start with you, Maritza.
I'll go first. Really quickly to introduce myself, my name is Maritza Dominguez. I work for Patreon. I've been there for 3 years. If you've never heard of Patreon, we are an online platform. We help artists and creators get paid from their fans. So your favorite YouTuber or your favorite podcast, digital artist, you name it, we've got it. I started my career a long time ago doing fraud prevention and chargeback. So Mr. Rodriguez on his way to the Dominican Republic is what I did all day, every day. And if you worked in a startup, you wear like 500 hats all at the same time. So that's what I've been doing. I'm currently the risk operations manager, which is all about relationships. So how do we get everybody working together to make sure risk is covered? So that includes customer support and product and every other person along with data science. So to bring it back to your question, we have a data science team who owns all of data and analytics, but the hope is that everyone would be able to pull their own data. Currently, our data science team is inundated with requests all the time because every team is looking at different things, open rates on emails, or how many times does a creator or a patron click on a thing? Did that new thing we roll out work? Did anybody use it? How many times are people emailing in about a thing? So every different team is looking at a completely different thing. So what we'd love is everybody to be able to be in charge of their own queries, data, all that good stuff. But right now, data science, I feel bad for them. They deserve all the medals because they've got a million requests. But yeah.
Excellent.
Amazing.
Ashwin, yeah.
Hi, I'm Ash. I'm the CEO of Thistle. For those of you that don't know, Thistle is a tech-enabled direct-to-consumer healthy food delivery company, which we launched 5 years ago to make it incredibly easy for people to invest in their long-term health via access to plant-based meals made out of real food. It's a relatively simple mission that we're on, but to do it well is incredibly complicated because our company is this odd mix of part technology company. We actually own the manufacturing function as well, so meaning that we own the production facilities that make our products. We actually own the logistics piece as well. So we do the last mile delivery ourselves via employees that we have as part of our company. So you have part tech, physical product, perishable, delivered multiple times a week, and on a subscription basis. So there are many, many, many opportunities for us to screw up, and we screw up a lot. And the entire reason we exist is because we focused all of our efforts in gaining the trust of our customer. And ultimately, what that meant was being reactive to their problems. But now the entire focus of the company over the last several years was how can we proactively fix problems for our customers before they materialize and ultimately churn. And so the question that you asked regarding who owns data and analytics on our team, the answer is everyone. So like Maritza, we have a data science team, and they are always inundated with questions and requests. But we fundamentally made a decision that we wanted to help people gain the skills required in order to pull their own data. So we actually launched a program called SQL and Sake, which the thesis is we'll give people alcohol and we'll teach you SQL. And the response has been shockingly positive.
I love this idea, and I'm so stealing it.
You should steal it. It's great. And to see a group of people effectively running SQL queries for an hour and a half come out of it smiling is actually a really awesome experience. So yeah, that's how we handle it at Thistle.
Awesome. Your question was who should own? Is that what you?
I let it flow a bit there. So should or does today? Because I think that's two different questions that are tied together for sure.
Well, so I think they're related. Does today and should. My take is it's extremely dependent on where you're at in the journey as a company. So SurveyMonkey, you've got a 20-year-old platform where folks have been looking for years at the life cycle and the data underneath that core platform. But when you start to transform your business, SurveyMonkey's for business, you start to have some complexity. I would love to say everyone should own the data, but in terms of making sure, and so I'm geeking out because I ran data warehousing for a long time. So I'm going back to your core architectural, structural, and you can't have your logic in Tableau. You need to have it at root. And so my take is that answer depends heavily on sort of where you're at as an organization, how clean your data is, how many data sources. I think that is the goal, is that you've got a data set that you do have that single source of truth, and then you do empower people to have those views and be able to marry that data. But if you don't have the foundation right, you can have train wrecks. And I don't know if everyone has been in an organization where you just said the churn is 22%, you said it's 23%, and why are these numbers different? Well, it turns out because you guys pulled them in different ways and your logic was different. And so I think at SurveyMonkey, we do have a central data engineering, data science team. You're right, they are inundated. You need to shift things to empower folks. But that can backfire tremendously if you have not built the foundation and the infrastructure, that there is some consistency in how people are pulling the data.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm going to follow up. I'm going to follow up with that, but I want to give folks a chance. We have the catch box.
No, this is
anyone already think of a question around this topic that they want to ask as we go through it? All right, we'll continue. So I want to plug a little more into that, because this idea, while it sounds spectacular, I guess I'll speak to the boss. While it sounds great to empower everyone, but Christine, you brought it up, which is how do you make sure then there's one version of the truth, right? How do you make sure that you're not presenting different numbers, or someone's presenting one client this or your CFO that? What kind of controls perhaps have you put in place for this, or are you still thinking through it?
For us, we're still thinking through it. We've got a lot of places where we failed at. We were talking before this, and I was mentioning how when we first started collecting data ages ago, no one thought that at some point we would be this big and that we would need to pull data. So naming conventions are all over the place. So it's really okay, I'm going to pull this SQL query, but is it with an S, or is that the one that doesn't have the S? Is it a capital? Is there an underscore in there? So we've already kind of screwed up, because at this point you can't fix that. So it's really thinking ahead a lot of times, and thinking, keeping your data clean and naming conventions that make sense, and making sure our data science team has also made skeleton queries that you can kind of use for the novice folks who want to kind of run their own things and, don't want to jump in and not have any idea, because who knows, is it the one with the S or not the S? We've also started using Mode, which I don't know if anybody else here has used Mode.
Anyone's using Mode yet? Oh, we got one in the back.
Yay!
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and Mode makes running those kinds of things much easier. It's much more user-friendly for folks who don't have a degree in SQL queries, because I don't. Yeah, so you can just click on what you're looking for, and it kind of builds its own thing for you. So we're trying to find ways so that folks can pull numbers that kind of match across the board, hopefully using both, because that makes more sense. But yeah, you never know. I mean, and then there's the thing of like naming conventions, and who knows where people are pulling stuff from. And then, what if you're not even pulling that data? We only just started keeping track of chargeback numbers, which is a sad thing. Don't even get me started on that.
From your fraud and compliance
Oh my
days.
God, yeah.
Ash, how about you guys? How are you kind of controlling the information here to make sure you're not double or sending different messages to different people?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem that you cited, which is a fairly common one, depending on how you kind of pull and cut and slice the data, you can get to meaningfully different results. But I think kind of like probably the two safety checks that we built in is ultimately, if it's a fundamental metric, then it's going to flow through our data science team anyway.
Yeah.
So that's one. And two, as kind of executives, leaders in the company, everyone is required to kind of know kind of the core metrics backwards on a weekly and sometimes on a daily level. Like that's a core requirement. So if something seems off, there are going to be others that kind of, how do you reconcile it? So there are kind of probably smaller decisions in which we're not double checking the work, but then the impact is not material. But for kind of larger things where you see something that is surprising to people, you'd probably be double checking that a couple times.
Yeah. And so we went public in September. So we're in our first, how many folks are at a public company? Okay. So we're in our first year of being a public company. So that also, changed the state. So in the sense of you want to, obviously what you're reporting out to the street, you want to make sure, any of those key metrics, you better be aligned. And obviously the financial ones are obvious, but if you're talking about things like active users or any of those other supporting metrics that give the market an indication of how you're doing, you really need a level of rigor. So in terms of how we're managing it, certainly similar, those key metrics, you do have those controls, you do have the dashboards that are considered vetted, QA'd, and single source of truth. When it comes to our financial data in some of those key leadership meetings, there is also someone in our FP&A team on the key metrics that they're the ones, reporting out that not only did I pull the data, it makes sense, I've reconciled it. So, love to be in a world that it's all automatically empowered, but the reality is for those tier 1 critical metrics that we're reporting out, it is both vetted and QA'd, and there is a human, for our self-service business, Clayton is in there. He is the one reporting out how we're doing as a business around the table to make sure that we're aligned. Exactly as you said, for the secondary, you're empowering folks to be going into Tableau, pulling their own data. Then the marketing folks, we're still on the journey of having that single source of truth where all your channels make sense. But that's another one.
Yes, similar to you, our head of data science is the only one who pulls things that are like for exec or whatever, because you don't want me pulling your query for exec, because that would be terrible. So she's the only one trusted to do those things, and they're vetted, and it's something she does weekly. So
Anyone have a different method, or does anyone have something that's really working for them that they want to share on this one from you guys? Here we are. All right, we get to throw out. We'll do the pass back of the box here. I'll go right here, and then you can pass it right back. Just pass it to him. Oh, we'll go right over you. There you go. Oh, we got the box on? If folks can hear, then we can pass on the box. If you just hold it as a safety net.
My name's Rob. I lead support at Caviar. So we work in Square. For a long time, Square has definitely had the ethos that we want data to be democratized, but we run into this issue. I think we've finally reached a really happy medium where our data teams are the gatekeepers of the source of truth for metrics. So if you have calculated fields, they build those calculated fields, but then we've recently introduced Looker. We moved away from Tableau to Looker. And so nearly anyone has access to Looker, and they know that the calculated fields they're drawing from are pre-vetted. So you're essentially in a playground. You're in a walled garden where like you can trust the data you have. Their data team is essentially like feeding you those fields, and then you can kind of do what you want with it. So I feel like that's a happy medium that works for us well.
Excellent. And anyone else? Anything that's working or not working that you want to share with folks as it goes? All right. We've started to touch on a fair bit here the visualization of this data. We've mentioned a few different products. So maybe you can explain a little more about what you're using. Again, for knowledge sharing, what you like about it, maybe what you don't like about it. Are you looking at a different visualization tool at the moment? It seems, and obviously it's really hot in the market now as well with Salesforce and Tableau and Microsoft and Power BI, right? Everyone's got their lookers coming on strong, so we'll go the other way this time. We'll start with Christine.
So we primarily are using Tableau. So we have partnerships with a lot of those, with Microsoft's a heavy partner, Salesforce, IBM, Watson. And so in terms of enabling our customers, we're flowing data into all, have integrations with all those. In terms of how we're running the business, a lot is done in Tableau. I think the risk of any data visualization is you got to figure out how to get the altitude versus looking at squiggly lines week by week. So, I think but that has more to do less about the tool and more about what are the questions you're asking. So, at the scale we have, in terms of our so the sales assistant is different. And our self-service business, you just have such scale, it is tempting to look, at the squiggly line and, Easter happened. Has anyone else had conversations around how Easter rotates throughout the year and it changes your year-over-year number and you're rolling 7 days? So, I think running the business well is the combination of the tools you're using and then balancing that you're asking the questions and you're running your business, certainly by looking at week by week what's happening, but also getting some altitude of like, okay, it's great to see the experiments we're running, but how are we at altitude looking at this quarter? And I think that's where I see a lot of organizations struggle. And the tool is a manifestation that helps you do that, but you got to be asking the right questions and getting altitude. And I see that's where it's often really hard because sometimes it's easier to stay in the squiggly line week by week.
Right. Do you? I know you mentioned Tableau. So do you extend Tableau to the user base, or do you?
For sure. Yes.
So everyone has sort of the access.
And we have similar. Rob, was it Rob? Yep. Similar where we have vetted dashboards with those guardrails where you can play. Our president, Tom, he is in there playing all the time. So yeah, we empower, certainly product heavy power users, marketing heavy power users. And then if you're kind of outside of the walled garden and you're asking a different question, that's usually where we're going to the data science team to set that framework up.
Excellent. Ash, what are you guys using?
Yeah, so we started out using a tool called Chart.io. And then moved over into Tableau, which seems to be what everyone's kind of moving into. And we give the entire kind of company access to it. And so most of those dashboards are already built. And you're absolutely right that the questions that you're asking matter. For us, when people are looking for help on pulling data that we may not have already set up for them or it's relatively difficult, I think more often than not, like the fundamental question you ask is, what business metric are you looking to move by pulling this data?
Yeah.
And more often than not, like people don't know, right? Or they don't know, they're unsure, or it's not a metric that's worth moving or that we're focusing on. And like oftentimes that gets rid of probably 3 out of 4 requests that come in that doesn't already have something built. And so for us, like we try to focus more on kind of what is it that we care about as a company? What is the metric you're looking to move? And if it's meaningful and important, it probably already exists. And if not, then let's get you there.
Cool. What are we using? So we have SQL, which really just, folks who've been at the company forever, or data sciences are really the only ones who really use that. We use Tableau, but we've got established workbooks in there and dashboards that everybody uses, and you just fiddle with them a little bit, but you don't really change them dramatically. Everyone has mostly shifted over into Mode, which, like I was saying earlier, is really just a lot of, clicking. Are you looking for, users who did this thing in this other thing, and it builds the query for you and pulls the data. So you don't need to know how to build a query on your own. So that's made it super easy for folks in, you know, customer success or folks in, you know, creator partnerships or whatever to pull data without having to have that knowledge of how to build a SQL query. So that's been super useful. Tableau is available to everybody. Not everybody fiddles with it because they're scared, which I understand. I don't want to break a dashboard. But yeah, mostly everyone has shifted over into Mode, which has made things a lot easier and more user-friendly, which I think is something we're trying to shift over so that core data science can take lunch.
Great. So I heard Looker was another one. Any other tool sets that folks are using that you absolutely love and kind of want to share, or anything, or questions you might have about particular products that you're using for data visualization?
We use Periscope.
What was that? Periscope?
Periscope.
What do you like about Periscope? What?
I think Periscope gives you an ability to actually, if somebody, the data science team is actually building a dashboard, there's an ability to actually go look at the SQL there.
There's a vicious rumor this is back working again, is it? Can you hear anything from there? We're gonna, oh, you can hear it, let's see. If not, we're retiring it permanently.
All right.
Okay, no,
Oh, there we go. We got it. All right.
yeah, you can actually see the sequence that's actually the data science team has used. So you can actually copy that and actually build your own dashboards and things like that. So we use Tableau as well, but Periscope is actually gaining a lot more momentum at Blue Jeans.
Anyone going through a process right now of looking at what you might switch to, or what you're maybe comparing different visualization tools? Everyone's settled in and you're happy with what you got. Interesting. All right. So we've had a lot of talk about all these different data sources and where they're coming from. So the next question's around, how important is it really to make sure that all of these different data sources sort of come together? And what are you doing to enable that inside the organization so that you can get all this data in one location, in one place for it to be worked on?
I'm gonna give you this one first while I think
We can
about
start with
that.
Ash if you want. Yeah,
Yes.
Ash, why don't you start out?
Yeah, that's a really, it's a hard question for us because the sources of our data come from kind of many different areas. So for example, you're getting all of your top of the funnel data that's, everything from website traffic to sign up conversions to actions that people are taking to our website, how that translates into the delivery experience for our customers. So kind of we know exactly how many times we can screw up on a delivery and the type of screw up in a delivery before a customer is in danger of churning, pulling that from its own source and marrying it with kind of where that customer is located geographically, their age, the demo. We found that people in cities and for example, in the financial district are a little bit more forgiving when it comes to errors because they understand the challenges when it comes to kind of getting a delivery right. The answer is hard, so our data science team steps in there. It's a hard one for kind of most people to kind of do if you don't have a good understanding of kind of how to kind of stitch together various data sets and pull insights.
Yeah, we have the same sort of issue. It's coming from a bunch of different places. And on top of that, there's a thing of you don't know what you don't know. So there are times we're not tracking something that we didn't know that we probably should be tracking until later on when someone says, hey, do we know how many blah, blah, blahs? And at no point did we think maybe we should be tracking that. Not to bring up chargebacks again, but just like chargebacks, at some point someone asked us, do we know how many chargebacks we get from so-and-so? And we hadn't been ingesting that info, so now we do, but it's one of those things of, it comes along with every other thing. Are we tracking clicks on this banner or whatever? And no one thinks, oh, maybe we should track that until later on when it's too late and we are now tracking it. So yeah, there's that problem as well of you don't know what you don't know until you don't know.
Christine.
Yeah, I mean, so survey, remind me, how many folks are B2C? And B2B? Okay, so mixed. And both? Yeah, exactly. So, so SurveyMonkey is, had about a 17-year journey as only B2C. And so you have, someone knocking on the door. We're actually the first freemium model, free, moving to a paid plan. And then the goal is to, keep them engaged, deliver value, maybe move them up and upgrade them. And then 3 years ago, as we move into a sales assisted model, those same folks who are in the self-service may move into a Teams plan, may move into, so they can collaborate, move into a sales assisted enterprise plan, or may buy our solutions. So when you ask about, where are those, what was the question, where are the challenges or where's the focus?
It was around the benefit of it, and then
Yeah.
obviously the challenges to get to it,
Yeah.
and where does that sort of cross
Yeah.
that you're saying it may not be
Yeah.
worth, the juice for trying to get.
Okay, so I would say on the B2C, the self-service side, the biggest opportunity, and you see, I don't know where your organizations are at in maturity, is really moving to a holistic view on the marketing side where you have multi-touch attribution. You understand, because the problem is, someone touches a paid ad right before they walk in the door, but as we know the buyer's journey, that's not the only thing they did. They, did a Google search, they saw a content piece, they did a bunch of stuff before they arrived at your front door, and you want to be looking at the customer view, because if you're organized by channel, the folks that run the email campaigns are like, look at my click-through rate, and the paid folks are like, look at my CAC, and then you have, let's see, paid, SEO, demand gen, they're all kind of looking at their channel, but you want to be flipping, saying, what's the journey of the customer? And that's both on the self-service side and certainly on the sales-assisted side. The sales-assisted side, though, you have that added layer of what are the touch points on the marketing side before they arrived, and then what's the touch points, how is that interaction between sales and those marketing touch points driving both, signing up, and then then you want to be looking at that, what are they doing? Because then, when you talk about a precursor in addition to your feedback program, what's a precursor to churn? Well, what are the people doing or not doing that are most likely to churn? To your point, you start to look at delivery, what's that breaking point if folks aren't engaged, et cetera. So I think it varies by business. Self-service, it's certainly really looking at that multi-touch attribution. And then I'd say on the sales assisted side, we're just younger, so it's just kind of painting that holistic view. But yeah, you can't do it, when your data is siloed and you combine it with often having functional, we used to be far more in a world, and we talked about this at the dinner when we met, we used to be in a world where there were far more cross-functional leadership. So folks had, they came from a cross-functional background. Now I see far more folks are like, they're starting from associate to manager, senior manager, director in this one channel. So they're SEO experts, or they're paid experts, or they're demand gen experts. The challenge with that is, from a customer's perspective, delivering a great customer experience is a holistic, it's a multi-function, and you gotta be flipping it, but we're often, our data and how we're organized ask questions about, well, I got my OKR to meet this goal, and we chunk it out.
Yeah, we spoke of that same about who owns the customer experience, right? It's sort of tied to the data behind it and things, and that's a shifting, changing topic for another conversation as it goes through and such. Do you have an example of maybe where you added a particular element that you weren't tracking, similar to yours with your chargebacks and such? Do you have an example maybe where you added an element that changed a decision that you were going to make in the future based on this new element or this new finding that came out of it?
I mean, there's so many things, really. Every time we roll out a change on Patreon, we think, okay, this is going to be the great new thing, and then we realize no one has ever clicked on it, nobody cared about it, and then we do some focus groups, and we find out they could care less about that. We spend all this time trying to build something to help with piracy on the internet, people stealing artwork off the site, and then we have a focus group and everybody's like, piracy's gonna happen on the internet, who cares? And it's, before we rolled it out, we thought this is the great new thing, and as we're pulling data, we're like, oh, nobody is clicking on the thing, nobody's using this extra addition, and then we talk to them and we find out they don't care. So, and then we roll that back. But then at that point, we've used up resources. So it happens a lot. We roll out these things that we think are just the great new thing, and then we find out, not really.
Ash, is there something where you thought, hey, or unexpectedly stumbled on some information that you sort of changed where you were going with your decision?
Yeah, so I think the most recent example, or one that came relatively recently, so at Thistle we have this rotating but fixed menu where every single week customers have 0 options on what they're getting for breakfast, lunch, and dinner apart from what's fixed for that week. And so there's different items on different days of the week. And then the following week, the entire menu shifts to effectively a week's worth of new items and then so forth until you kind of go in this like magical 5-week journey, at which point you repeat and then we change every season. So like the point is products come up that are constantly changing. And so we had embedded this one feature early on in which our customers are rating all of our products. They're incredibly enthusiastic about it because they know that we look at every single point of feedback, we improve it. And so when customers had rated meals incredibly highly, we would flag it for them when it was coming back on the menu. And that actually drove a lot of additions when people said, oh, I love that item 5 weeks ago. I didn't know exactly when it's come back. You've told me it's coming back. I'm going to add it. So that was a really, really value-added feature that we built. But then someone on our customer support team said, okay, that's awesome. How about we start tracking when meals that customers have rated poorly come up on the menu on an individual level? And one, should we be tracking that on a customer by customer level, and should we be alerting them? Because the funny thing about food is 95% of people may like a particular dish we put out, but simply because of variations on taste, that 5%, regardless of everyone else liking it, may not. And so we kind of added this kind of manual kind of feature where we started tracking, okay, this is a two-star meal that someone rated, let's let them know. First off, letting them know, let's see what impact that has. So one, like that actually like increased the amount of engagement that people had when it comes to logging in and proactively managing their menu, which actually decreased the churn rate. 2, and we actually launched a feature where we let them know and said, would you like us to change this for you? And there was a human doing this. The answer was yes. And then finally, we automated it. So that kind of all of that was data that we weren't tracking that kind of was a little bit counterintuitive, but it makes perfect sense right now. And it moved a fundamental metric for us.
Yeah, I'll come back to some of the surprises from gathering feedback. So as a source of data. So someone brought up the hero campaign, Be Your Customer's Hero. It was the title of the topic, but also this is the campaign we ran. We kicked it off on May 1st. I think we released our first thing, but all the decisions were locked in April. We didn't actually get budget and commit budget until March 1st. So on March 1st, you have, hey, here's budget to run this brand campaign. It would be really great if you can have it up and running in May. Why? Because Gainsight's Pulse conference, we're going to be in London for an event. We're going to do this event in Times Square. So yeah, if you could just have all the video done, you guys know where this is going. Video done, and then the bus wraps would be super cool. So here's your budget, execute in 30 days. So a small team, obviously we've never done a brand campaign before. So, CEO, CFO, president, everybody's a marketer. So we all have, if you could just kind of use this kind of image and this kind of color, and I think this copy would work best. So what the team did is, an extension off of SurveyMonkey, we've got SurveyMonkey Audience, and they ran tests. First they said that the first test they ran was to try to understand the right neighborhood. We're thinking of these different kind of campaign themes around Be Your Customer's Hero. There were other around driving decisions. And then that was the first week. And then the second week, they got into from neighborhood to house. Is the SurveyMonkey green color, is that okay for business? Can you put that outside and then out of home? Can you put that on a billboard on the 101? And the irony is they had that data, and when they came in the group of leaders, they actually asked all of us what we thought. and 75% of us, including myself, totally wrong image, wrong copy, wrong color. But when we had measured to our target market, 1,000 IT folks, 1,000 marketers, so that was a great example of that reminder of asking in that agile way, and in terms of there is no way that campaign would have happened, not because there wasn't budget. We could have never gotten internal alignment, and what would have happened is it would have been watered down, but instead we tested in the market. And so when that creative team, the 3 folks that led that, walked in the door, they're like, this is what tested, but they first had us test and realized we were wrong, so that we were like, okay, we trust that's what the data said. So anyways, that my example is around that opportunity of just, and your example is, continuing to ask feedback.
I want to make sure I'm leaving space. I realize I keep interjecting a question. Anyone with a question for the panel at the moment, or anything you really want to focus on? Otherwise, I'll just keep kind of going through. Sure.
Back to your points on B2B and B2C.
Yeah.
So I think you said you only launched the enterprise product recently. Do you find many customers coming back looking for customized data or analytics solution, or is it you've got one solution fits all?
Good question. So are the expectations of our SurveyMonkey enterprise customers, do they have different analytics expectations? What we're seeing on the enterprise side, so you have folks, most folks have been using SurveyMonkey, and what they love is that it's easy to use, it's agile. They use that analyze functionality to kind of understand the data that they're gathering. What we see happening on the enterprise side is more about data. It's about data integrity, data ownership, but it's also about data movement. So yes, their standards are higher, our enterprise customers, but the way they are addressing that is in some cases, and we will continue to invest in our analyze functionality, like sentiment analysis and crosstabs has been a big thing we've needed to address that we just rolled out. But we're also saying, if you have a tool that you're already using, Looker, Tableau, IBM Watson, or in the case of Lyft, who is a big SurveyMonkey customer, they're using our API to be able to gather their feedback and plug into their systems. They're using our open API. So yes, the standards are higher, but on the B2B side, our take is we will never keep up with an organization whose total focus is data visualization. So we will make it really flippin' easy for you to move your data and where your employees are already working. So our whole thing is get it into existing workflow. If your company's a Tableau company, get it into there so you can start to join those data sets.
Similarly, at Patreon, we don't just have small size creators. We also have some premium creators that are like full teams. They're also looking for data on their own because they're like a legit business. They have like a full team of people. So they also want their own personalized data. What kind of engagement are they getting? How many clicks are their posts getting? Do their users like this kind of thing, that kind of thing. So we've also had to hire data scientists to pull data for individual premium creators, but that's something that we're looking to also roll out to those creators so that they can run their own data, because what we had never thought of was that some creators eventually become their own business, because they become giant and they're making millions of dollars per year. So yeah, something else we've now had to think about.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Here's one. It's one thing to have data, it's one thing to have information, but if you're not taking action on it, then what's the purpose of having it as it goes through? So what challenges do you think, or have you had in your organization in making that data actionable? And for folks who may be experiencing that right now, what ways maybe have you overcome it, or suggestions for how to overcome some of these challenges in making it actionable? Ash, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think, again, reinforcing time and time again, you want this data, link it directly to the core business metric that you're looking to move, right? And kind of force people to directly tie a hypothesis to that metric, and then empower them to go run the test. Okay, great, you have a hypothesis saying this data has provided this insight, so call it, I'm gonna run this type of campaign in order to improve my conversion rate by X or my open rate by Y. Great, go try it out. And then come back and see, okay, what did you learn from that? And I think kind of reinforcing just in general and empowering everyone to kind of think in that way actually allows people to not waste time kind of, not really kind of thinking through what is the purpose of them trying to even get this information. Because I think kind of in our environment, oftentimes like everyone wants to be data driven, we're a data driven company, but people feel like what that means is like they should just be pulling data, right? And like the number of times like people have presented data to me with no clear link to kind of a metric that is actionable or a strategy that is in line with the company strategy. I mean, the whole goal is to help people kind of form those links in order to see whether or not the thing that they're embarking upon is even worth embarking upon.
It sounds like a key part of what you're saying, though, is you're enabling a culture that allows people to act on the information or the data that they have as well. So again, one thing to find it, but to say, well, do something with it, and allowing them the freedom to try that and run with it as well.
Yeah.
For us, data and analytics, well, for me, data and analytics has been the golden ticket. We had all the anecdotal evidence of all these terrible things that people experienced or that we personally experienced, doing the work, but without the data to back it up, everybody was like, yeah, whatever. You don't need to hire more people. You don't need to do this thing, and that's not a big deal. But once we started connecting the anecdotal evidence to the data, then we got things moving. Then everybody paid attention. But otherwise, especially coming from customer support or fraud prevention front, us saying, oh, there's so much of this one thing, and then saying, yeah, okay, that's fine. But once you pull some data and go, oh my God, it's thousands of accounts, then we can get some things moving. Thank goodness. So thank goodness for data and analytics. Then I hired people, and it wasn't just me.
So again, you think it's the culture within your company now that allows people to kind of take that and try it to make it actionable?
Yeah, because, coming from customer support or fraud, it's more anecdotal for us. So the things that we see, so the trials and tribulations we're going through, we can talk all day about, fatigue of looking at a fraud queue and going over and over again, or the fatigue of getting a million emails about a thing. But if you complain about it and all you have is the anecdotal evidence, everybody's gonna say, well, I mean, how many do you think this is? A couple? Blah, blah, blah. But once you pull that and say, well, yes, this is terrible for me, I'm experiencing this terrible thing. Plus, look at all this data of all these unhappy people. That's when people paid attention. But without those numbers, nobody cared.
I like what you said earlier about the notion that if you tie it to a financial metric, that's actually probably one of the most powerful motivators. So I think, and one thing that we try to actually like empower in our culture is it's great that the metric that you're looking at is conversion rate. Like, okay, what's the financial metric that's going to tie to? And okay, great, like improve your conversion rate means that your customer acquisition costs have gone down, which means that you're saving X hundreds of thousands of dollars on over this period of time. Like, you will get the attention of our VP of Finance.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think do not waste goal setting time, right? So if most organizations, it's shareholder, customer, employee, most organizations model their goals into what are you delivering for shareholder, employee, customers. Increasingly, we're seeing community and how are you giving back to the community that you work in. So the more you can be aligned to company goals, so your customer goals, what is that experience? Do you have a feedback program that says you're going to improve that customer experience? Because all the work you're doing, if it is in line with that goal that you're trying to accomplish, and then to your point, is that measuring back on the financial side of like delivering a better customer experience is good business. It drives growth. That to me is, when all is said and done, the boardroom and the exec room, the number one challenge is delivering, whether you're private or public, B2C or B2B, it is delivering a growth target that always feels like it's too much, right? If you're 5% and you're told to go to 10%, it's too much. If you're 100%, going to 200%, it always feels too much. It's always stretch. And so the more you can align yourself with, at the top, the focus is how do I reach those growth targets? Well, you reach it by delighting customers, and you reach it by keeping your high performers engaged and at full throttle, and creating that great environment by listening to them. And then your shareholders benefit. So the more you can tie to, I find, growth, the more you have the data to support that, the more you'll reach your customer experience objectives.
I think it's bringing us just about to the end. Any last questions from you guys that you have for our team up here? Here we are.
So I'm Gautam, I head up support at Nextdoor. Couple of questions. As it relates to unstructured data using cloud text analytics.
Sorry. Maggie, did you want to take unstructured data? Just kidding.
So my question is beyond sentiment analysis. I'm curious about what people are using, what people are using to get a sense of what the themes from your unstructured data. And a follow-up to that question is, I think somebody was talking about customer support data. Our traditional way is, again, to categorize cases, that we have 900 different ways you can categorize a case. But has anyone found an innovative way to pull insights from your customer support data beyond just looking at the categories?
I'll take the second one first, and then I'll take a swing at the first and then hand over. Our help center team, who is, as I mentioned, 96% deflection rate, they started first, how do you get folks to deliver those answers? And then they started doing, but it was not, I'd love to say it was, the data science team led. And in fact, we started the project as a data science team led project to actually figure out different ways to categorize and deliver the data to our customers in the ways that made the most sense. It started as a data science project, and it shifted over to be a far more manual, reading those top cases and manually categorizing them. The results have been so impactful, it was worth the effort, and we happen to have a really strong leader who knows how to both manage day-to-day and have a 3-year goal that she's literally led her team through. So I could definitely connect you. She did she called it the Case Insights Project, a phenomenal report out on what she did. I would love to say it happened kind of in an AI environment, but really it was real people reading cases and applying logic. So we'll get there some day. We're not there yet. On the sentiment analysis, I actually have not done. It's certainly something I could follow up with. What are people using? We certainly know, I know on our CX product helps you with driver analysis by basically mining that open-ended text to give you top drivers. So that's why a lot of folks are buying our CX product. It's really the analysis, the driver analysis. In SurveyMonkey's core platform, I don't know our top use cases, but it's a great question. It's a great question, but I don't know the top use cases of how folks are using. I do know it's one of the top features, and it was a hard one to build. So it took us a while. We needed to do some underlying data work.
Well, that brings us to the end. So thank you guys. Thank you guys for the questions as well as we go through. So let's give these guys a round of applause, and I think we're ready to